Finally, Mr. Tunde has understood how to identify viable commercial and industrial solar projects. He then realizes the recurring issues affecting operations of the national grid in rural areas across the country, which has given these solar projects so much significance in today's economy. So he once again asks Mr. Greco to enlighten him on the issues and potentials for mini-grids. Welcome to expanding electricity access through mini-grids.
Membership to Suraj and the Greco Academy. Today, we'll be talking about expanding electricity access through mini-grids. That is going to be the topic of our discussion. This topic is shall be following the presentation outline by discussing the overview of the Nigerian power sector, power generation in Nigeria, what exactly mini-grid is, the types of mini-grid generation, technology, the components of mini-grid. We will then discuss about the key stakeholder and policies and permits from key institutions that are concerned with administering mini-grid regulation. We'll also talk about the funding source, and finally, we'll talk about the productive end use that's expected from consumers. Now, starting from the introduction, it is on record that the electricity generation in Nigeria actually started in 1896. That's a long time ago. But not until 1929, when the first utility company was established, which was known as the Nigerian Electricity Supply Company, NESC. All through these years, this utility company has been providing power to Nigerians. However, as population goes up, there will be need to increase capacity became apparent. Unfortunately, all generation capacity remains stagnant, and that was what prompted the Olusegun Obasanjo during his civilian rule that started in 1999 to review the activities behind NEPA and then try to separate the entity called NEPA, which was then in charge of generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity in Nigeria. As at that time, records have it that the total generating capacity the country had was about 6,200 megawatts from two sources, hydro and thermal plants. Today, the story has changed, even though not the way that we expected, but at least generation capacity has actually gone up. And apart from going up, we now have different sources which are now beyond the hydro and the thermal power plants that we used to have then. Now, the question is, apart from the population, what other thing is stopping this power sector from going ahead? There are a lot of issues. starting from the lack of maintenance of infrastructure to outdated land to low revenue and losses, the technical losses that is being experienced, down to thefts, power thefts by consumers, and the non-reflective tariff that the present disco has been charged to battle with. Now, next slide. Let's look at the power generation in Nigeria. As this slide has it, as poor power sector. As of 2019, it is on record that Nigeria has a transmission capacity of about 8,100 megawatts. And in this same 2019, in February 7, 2019, Nigeria witnessed its highest generation capacity of 5,375 megawatts. That is the highest generation that the country has ever witnessed. Unfortunately, research has that the energy demand that the country actually needed with a population of over 200 million is about 98,000 megawatts. So, we can see the reason why it's really called poor power sector. Imagine 98,000 megawatts and being subtracted from subtracting 5,375 megawatts. That's a big problem. From the transmission side, so that same 2019, we have about 12,522 megawatts. That's almost twice of what we had in year 2000. And this same capacity, apart from the hydro, we also have the thermal. And then presently we have a lot of solar plants that are being built here and there, which are in the scale of megawatts. We have that of Bayero, we have that of Federal University in Abakaliki, and other selected universities and college teaching hospitals. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide here is talking about the power flow. Initially we said it can be the power sector activities can be divided into the generation, transmission, and distribution. All these three is being shown under this power flow, starting from the power plant to the step-up transformer, through the transmission tower, passing through the transmission substation and distribution substation, to the step-down transformer, and finally to the consumer, either home, offices, or other businesses. This is an exact replica of what a power flow looks like. Next slide. As we said initially, the government have already concessioned the then NEPA to PSCN and then to DISCOs. Now Nigeria now has 11 DISCO distribution companies. And as we can see from the map here, and from the side, each color represents the community or the state under its radar. There are 11, and the whole 36 states, including FCT, have been distributed under these 11 DISCOs. So that is how the geographical spread is. Next slide. We will now talk about the electricity generation in terms of categories. We have been able to categorize electricity generation into four. We have those that are grid connected, the captive power, the embedded generation, and the mini grid. The grid connected is the one that we are usually used to, while the captive and the embedded are new coined word, and a lot of companies, especially in Lagos, are now generating their power using the captive power system and embedded generation. But based on our presentation, the fourth one, which is the mini grid, is where our concern lies. Now, the question on this slide is that what is mini grid? And we have defined mini grid as a set of small electricity generators that is possibly energy storage systems that are intercontinental to a distribution system that supply electricity demand of a limited number of customers. One thing is glaring here, and that is generation, distribution, and then more than one person must be involved. This is what brings some up to what we define as mini grids. Now let's talk about mini grids. What type do we have? We have the ones we call the isolated mini grid, and we have the one they call intercontinental mini grid, which according to the policy document from NEC were well specified or defined. Now, next slide. Before we go into details of the isolated and the intercontinental mini grid, let's try to see what generation technologies are actually available for mini grids. Apart from the fact that mini grids can be powered by hydro, biomass too, solar and fossil fuels, which primarily the use of diesel in a generating system, or when we talk about the hybrid system. Hybrid meaning adding two different technologies as one. For example, it's possible for us to add a solar PV system to a diesel fuel generator, or a solar PV system and a wind turbine system. This is what comes up to what is called hybrid system. So as we can see in this picture, we can see the transmission line, we can see the generation, and at the same time we can see the customer houses or churches or fuel stations that's under the commercial that uses this power. So, from the generation technology that is existing, let's go to the next slide to see what the components of a mini grid are. Already we've said it, but for emphasis sake, we have the generation asset, the conversion asset, the storage asset, the distribution asset, and finally the consumer. These are the components of a mini grid. As we have said, the generation assets are those that are used to generate the power that is being used. For example, when you talk about a generator or you talk about solar module itself. Then the conversion assets are those assets that we use to convert the energy generated by the panel from the sun into a usable form. When we talk about solar inverters, charge controllers, they fall under the conversion asset. Even the transmission line, okay, those two fall under the conversion asset. Next is the storage asset, which includes the battery. And batteries can be of different types. When we talk about batteries, which we will use to store energy for power for the time that there is no sun or no fuel to run the generator, the battery comes alive. Next is the distribution asset, which include the transmission lines. So all those wires that are linked from one pole to another. When you talk about transformer, whether step up or step down transformer, that's where the distribution asset falls. And then finally, we've decided to add consumer as part of the components of mini grid, since they are important parts of the equation. If there is nobody to consume the power, then the plant will be as useless as you might say. Because after all, it is being used for consumers to use. So that is the reason why we've added the consumer as part of the component, essential component of a mini grid. Next slide. Let's have a look at this picture of a generating asset. This is a picture showing the panel as a generating asset and the generator, fuel generator, as a generating asset. Next, we'll talk about the storage and conversion asset, which we are seeing here. You can see the SMA inverters. You can also see batteries that are used to store this energy. So all these are important for us to have a usable power at the end of the day. Next is a distribution asset, which include the pole, the cables, the metering, whether the smart metering or the pay-as-you-go metering or the analog, whatever metering system the developer decides to use. They all fall under the distribution asset. Next slide, we'll be talking about the ownership model, which includes the private company ownership, the community ownership, the government ownership, and mix, or what I may call the hybrid ownership, which is the addition of any of the two above. When we talk about the private company ownership, that's when a developer is single-handedly owning the mini grid plant. When we talk about the community ownership, this is when the community are actually the owner of the mini grid. They used their money, contributed their money to build the mini grid. The third one is when you talk about the government ownership. This is a situation whereby government, through REA or any of its agencies or ministry, decide to build a mini grid for a particular community without collecting funds from them. This is what we know as the government ownership. Then finally, when we talk about the mixed ownership, the mixed ownership is the combination of any of the two. Let's say, for example, the REA project, whereby governments have paid subsidy to developers, tax payments, and then developers are expected to also bring their own equity and debt into it in order to build the plant and then get their money through sales of energy. When a situation like this come up, it is known as mixed ownership, where you have two or more ownership methods earlier mentioned of owning the mini-grid plant. Next on this slide, we've tried to bring out the pros and cons of each of these methods, different utility models or structure, be it the private or the community or the public-private or the utility model. We try to bring in their advantages and disadvantages, which we can see. For example, let's take the private ownership, which has the advantage of being good, having good competencies, market-driven, and then decentralized management, and can also attract private finance. However, this private model do not go without having its disadvantages, which include upfront finance, sector lacking tariff, sector lack experience, tariff and management of customer relations, policy and regulatory framework. So each of these models or structure has its advantage and disadvantage. So what is expected of one who wants to dive into it? Before picking any model, you need to know what are the advantages of going privately owned, or what are the disadvantages of going privately owned. What are the advantages of going hybrid, or what are the disadvantages of going hybrid? Those are some of the things that a developer will have to look into before coming into conclusion. Next. Talking about the key stakeholders, now the public institutions, which include the Ministry of Power, the Ministry of Environment, the Rural Electrification Agency, that's the REA, the NEMSA, and the NEC. Those are some of the key stakeholders from the public institutions that are responsible for administering the regulation and policies on mini-grid developers. Although we have other stakeholders, such as the international development partners, the developers themselves, the consumers, NGOs operating in that community, those are the other stakeholders. But for this particular slide, we are talking about those that are from the public institution. So when next somebody is into the project development of a mini grid, you should know that you will definitely cross paths with each or every one of these stakeholders. Now, next we'll be talking about the policies, permits that these key institutions or stakeholders administer on developers, whether private, commercial, hybrid. There are some laws, some acts, some policies that they need to put in order, that they need to understand, that they need to factor into their design. One of the most important policy is that of the Mini Grid 2016, which was released by NEC. There are other regulatory guidelines from NEMSA, which has just been released from 2-3 weeks ago. Then we have some acts and some policies, such as the Nigerian Electric Energy Policy document, the NREEP, which is the Nigerian Renewable Energy Plan, and the Nigerian Renewable and Energy Efficiency Plan. Those are some of the documents that a developer needs to really have a grasp of in order to be able to develop a successful mini grid. Now, let's take the most important one from this next slide, which is the Mini Grid 2016 required document from the NEC. This is the document that actually spells out everything that the developer needs to do from the beginning to the end. And listed here are some of the documents that we needed to be submitted to NEC as part of the requirement. Though it may depend on what is actually existing, it starts from the submission of the CAC Certificate of Incorporation to the MES, that's Memorandum and Article of Association, to the Deed of Partnership, 35 copies of occupancy, to lease agreements, and others. These are actually some of the documents that will be required for registration or getting permits for a proposed mini grid. Now, we initially talked about mini grids being isolated and interconnected type. When we talk about a mini grid, an isolated mini grid, these are mini grids that are built in a community where there is no distribution line, where utility line does not get into, in an isolated community. Whereas when we talk about intercontinental mini grid, we're talking about a mini grid that is built in an underserved area. That is, meaning there is actually utility distribution line that goes into this community, supply line, but maybe the light is not always there, and then there is need to increase the power for the community. In this situation, you have what we call the intercontinental mini grid. Here, the mini grid distribution line will actually be held by the DISCO under which that particular location falls. So there is need for synergy between the developer and the DISCO management to be able to agree on the operating modalities. So now let's look at the isolated mini grid, which again, according to the NEC regulation, is separated or distinguished into two different systems. We have those isolated systems that are less than 100 kilowatts, and we have those that are above 100 kilowatts. For those that are less than 100 kilowatts, A developer only needed a permit, but registration is not compulsory. The steps involved here include identifying of the community, contacting the community to sign up an exclusive agreement, which is very important. Once you have signed an exclusive agreement, that means no any other developer can come into such community once an exclusivity agreement has been signed. Thereafter, you go into the system design, and then after the system design, and the developer has known what the system is going to cost and what the energy is going to be in terms of the usage and what have you and the equipment side, you now go back into the community to sign a commercial agreement with the community. Here is where you now have to discuss the energy cost. Whether you are selling below 100 naira per kilowatt hour or you are selling above 100 naira per kilowatt hour. This is the particular point where that will be discussed and must be agreed. Next step is to acquire land that is necessary for building the plant. Here, land can either be in terms of lease, purchase, or a free gift from the community. Most developers usually want lands that are free gifts in order to reduce the cost of building the plant. Thereafter, in step 6, the developer will have to go into the construction, the testing, and the commissioning of the plant, after which he will have to go to NEC for registration of the plant. Category 2 of the mini grid regulation, looking at it from the isolated system point, we are going to take category 2 as those mini grids that are above 100 kilowatts. The one we just finished initially was less than 100 kilowatts. For any mini grid that is above 100 kilowatts, the mini grid regulation category 2 will be applicable. Here, the developer must get a permit. It's not like the initial one where it is optional getting a registration. Now it is compulsory for the developer to get a permit. And again, it is compulsory for the developer to submit all these documents that we have listed here, which include the submission of an application for that intended location, to confirmation by the community, down to the letters, to all necessary land and construction installation details. We have to submit it. Here, we also have a pictorial view of what application process of an isolated mini grid that is above 100 kilowatts will require. This time around, we have step 8, unlike the first one that stopped at step 7. And it's almost the same thing, just a little difference. When you talk about, you have to identify the community, you have to sign community exclusivity agreement down to the design and commercial agreement. Next, you acquire the land and get all necessary building approvals from the state government or federal government, local government. Next, you apply to NEC for operating permits for that particular intended area. Thereafter, after the approval, you now construct, test, and commission. And finally, you submit all hard copies and soft copies of the required document. Lastly, we have also brought the registration application for an intercontinental mini grid, which we have actually defined to be from 0.1 megawatts to 1 megawatt. That means the intercontinental mini grid has to have something we call a tripartite agreement signed between the discos that hold the distribution line, that own the location under their region. It also has to be with the community. They have to sign that they agree on the terms and conditions. And finally, the developer, which can either be a private developer or a commercial community developer, whichever is. So, these 8 to 9 steps are the application process that are required for the intercontinental mini grid. It's also the same with the initial one that I just explained, except that this time around we have what we call the tripartite agreement under the step 4. Let's look at the integration of mini grid in an undergrid community, what it used to be, and what we are looking at. Here, under this figure, we have a community, a rural community that is being powered by self-diesel generator on the right-hand side, and we also have an urban community that is being supplied power with a distribution line. So, in between, there is a break in transmission. So, now, there is a proposal that we should either eliminate the self-generated diesel that supply community, the rural community power, or we add a solar to make it an hybrid system so as to reduce the operating cost. On the other side, the distribution company supplies power to the urban community. So that is, in order for us to, the reason for this is because there is need for consistent and reliable power supply, and then there is also need for the rural communities to save money, which means if you are to use an hybrid system, it will be cheaper than for the community to be using 100% diesel fuel. Finally, on the long term, the thinking is that we will be able to interconnect the rural community to the urban communities. That interconnecting the distribution companies to that of the mini grid company so that they can work as synergy. So that is the plan for the long term, and it has started working as planned. Next slide, we'll be talking about funding source. A lot of funding source for developers or commercial, whoever is interested, either be it a self-financing or getting a grant or a concessional grant from international donors, or borrowing funds from microfinance or social investors, carbon emission financing, government funds and grants, and lastly, crowdfunding. Each of these funding sources has its advantages and disadvantages. So, before a developer dives into any of this, you need to really scout around and know what the pros and the cons of each of these financing systems is. Next slide, which be like the funding risk analysis. Drawing here, we see the project development process starting from the project ideal conception to pre-feasibility development to the technical feasibility, down to the commercial feasibility, and finally to the implementation. As a developer gets to each of these stages, the risk gets reduced. It is going to be easier for a developer to get money from the financial investors at the project implementation stage than when the project is still at idea or conceptual stage. So, as you go along and get these plans implemented, the risk involved become less and less and less. So, the advice here is that before building a mini grid, you need to sit down and know what are the risks. You need to carry out a risk analysis. What are the risks that you are likely to face? And then, on the other part, you look at it from what are the mitigation solutions that you need to use in stopping this risk or reducing the risk. It's not all risk that can be stopped, but you can reduce the risk to a manageable size. So, every developer will need to really carry out what is known as a risk analysis before going ahead to build the plan. On the final note, we shall be talking about the consumer and productive end use. We have come to realize from those mini grids that we have built that without a productive activities going on in the community, the consumer will not have money to pay for the energy. Apart from the fact that mini grids in Nigeria for now is still more expensive than the public utility light, which is usually not available, we have come to term that communities with productive activities end use usually will have money to pay. That's why during the project development process, you need to carry what we call your WPP, which is known as willingness to pay. At the same time, you also carry what is known as APP, ability to pay. They are two different things. Willingness to pay, ability to pay. Once both are on the good side, we are as good as you might think of it. So, some of the things that need to be considered have been listed so that we will not have any issue with the community. And now, some of the activities that a developer will be looking into is like having a hotel in the community, to having a refrigerator that can be powered by solar from the mini grid site, which again can be used to store food and agri-processing items, down to milling of grains or rice husk, and a host of other activities that are going on in the community. Talk about barbing saloon, talk about welding shop, video centers, football viewing centers, etc. All these, a developer with a lot of this in that community means they will have enough cash to buy energy. This brings me to the end of our presentation. If you have any question, you can contact us at Greco Academy at Block 1 Drive 5, Second Gate, Prince and Princess Estate, Tara District, Abuja. You can also get across to us through the website at www.grecopower.com.ng or email us at info@grecopower.com. You may also decide to call us on our mobile at 08090207682. We look forward to having you. Thank you.